Like every other morning, Tu Nha set out on her usual routine, heading to the fields to begin her harvest. The sun had just risen, casting a golden glow over the rows of dragon fruit trees. With practiced hands and quiet determination, she picked each ripe fruit, carefully inspecting them as she placed them in her basket. Today was a good day. The harvest was generous, and the dragon fruits were especially plump and vibrant, their bright pink skins glowing under the morning light. She paused for a moment, wiping the sweat from her brow and smiling softly to herself. She knew these fruits would sell well at the market. It meant she'd be able to cover more than just the usual expenses. It gave her a little breathing room, maybe even enough to tuck some away for her daughter's future. But Tu Nha wasn't thinking only about money. As she sorted the best ones, she set aside a few of the juiciest, most perfect dragon fruits. These weren't for selling. These were for Kiet. She knew he'd be coming up to visit in the next few days, and she wanted them to share something sweet and refreshing together. It was her quiet way of showing she cared, saving the best for the one person who always made her feel seen, heard, and understood. That morning, Kiet made his usual round at the lumber mill. The weather had taken a turn. Rainy days had brought most of the work to a halt, so the machinery sat silent, and the workers were off for the time being. Still, Kiet believed in staying on top of things. He strolled through the quiet workshop booths, tapping softly on damp concrete eyes, scanning every corner of the facility to make sure everything was in order. Spotting Nam nearby, he motioned him over and gave him a few simple tasks, mostly light cleanup around the mill while operations were paused. Nothing too heavy, just enough to keep things in shape until the rain passed and the machines could roar back to life. Kiet's tone was calm but firm as always. Once everything had been said and sorted, he gave Nam a nod and headed out. On his way back, Kiet made a small detour, one that had become a bit of a habit lately. He stopped by the local market, walking slowly between stalls shaded by blue tarps and patched umbrellas. The familiar scent of fresh herbs, grilled meat, and ripe fruit danced through the air. With practiced ease, he picked up a few groceries, some vegetables, a bit of pork, a few simple ingredients. Nothing fancy, just enough to make a wholesome meal. But it wasn't just any meal. Kiet had someone special in mind. He was headed to Tu Nha's house. It wasn't the first time he'd stopped by unannounced, and probably wouldn't be the last. There was something comforting about being in her space even if she wasn't there. It gave him a sense of peace, a sense of purpose. He cared deeply for her more than he ever dared say out loud. When he arrived, the house was quiet. He looked around, called her name once or twice, but quickly figured she wasn't home yet. Probably still at work, he thought. He let himself in, placed the bags down, and sat for a moment in the familiar wooden chair by the window. The sound of soft rain tapping on the rooftop filled the silence, and for a moment he just sat there, thinking, breathing, waiting. But Kiet was never one to sit still for long. After a few minutes of rest, he stood up, rolled up his sleeves, and headed straight to the kitchen. The space was modest, but cozy, just like the rest of her home. He smiled to himself. As he looked around, it felt like her in every detail. Without hesitation, he began organizing the groceries, cleaning up the counter, and prepping the ingredients. He worked quietly, but with a sense of intention, slicing vegetables, seasoning the meat-setting rice to steam. He wasn't a professional chef by any means, but the dishes he made came from the heart. There was braised pork tender and caramelized just right, a pot of simple vegetable soup, warm and light, the kind of dish that soothes your soul after a long day. and a plate of boiled pork belly with dipping sauce exactly the way he remembered Tu Nha liked it. Each dish, though simple, carried meaning. To anyone else, it might have looked like a basic home-cooked meal. But to Kiet, this was a quiet love letter written in broth and seasoning in every stir of the spoon and every mindful step around the kitchen. By the time he finished, the room was filled with the comforting aroma of home cooking. He wiped his hands on a towel, looked around, and smiled. Everything was ready. Now, all that was missing was Tu Nha. He glanced at the door, waiting for the sound of footsteps or the familiar creak of the gate. The table was set, and the food was still warm. He didn't know exactly when she'd walk through that door, but when she did, he wanted her to know she was cared for. Not with grand gestures or dramatic words, but with the kind of love that shows up, does the quiet work, and waits patiently. And that's what Kiet did. He waited. With a full heart and a quiet hope he waited. Kiet sat quietly on the wooden chair near the window, lost in thought. The soft murmur of rain tapping on the tin roof created a calm rhythm, almost like a lullaby. He glanced out toward the gate now and then, not anxiously, but with a quiet hope. The house smelled of warm rice, braised pork, and fresh herb shed spent the last hour preparing everything from scratch, pouring his care into each dish. As he leaned back, still wrapped in his thoughts, he caught a glimpse of two familiar figures approaching through the drizzle. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Tu Nha was coming up the path, her daughter nestled in her arms, wrapped snugly in a small jacket. Despite the long day, Tu Nha still carried herself with that quiet strength he had always admired. She stepped through the gate, surprised to see him there waiting. "Oh, Kiet, what are you doing up here at this hour?" she asked, her voice bright with surprise and joy. He stood up slowly, brushing off his pants, and met her eyes with a gentle grin. "The workshop's closed. Today rains, got everything on pause. I figured I'd come see how you and the little one were doing. Besides," he paused, his eyes softening, "I promised he'd come have a meal with you two. I've already cooked. Go wash up, and I'll get the rice ready." Tu Nha chuckled a little, caught off guard, but clearly touched. She turned to bring her daughter inside, setting the toddler down gently and heading to wash her hands. In the meantime, Kiet moved back into the kitchen, quickly plating the food with a familiar rhythm. The dishes weren't extravagant, just braised pork with caramelized shallots, boiled greens, a light soup, and warm white rice, but each one carried the weight of intention, of care. By the time Tu Nha returned, the table was neatly set, and the steam from the hot food curled up into the air like a quiet invitation. She took her seat across from him, glancing at the spread and smiling in that soft, appreciative way she did whenever someone did something kind but didn't make a big deal out of it. "This smells amazing," she said, looking genuinely impressed. "You really cooked all this yourself?" "I did," Kiet replied, shrugging with humble pride. "It's simple stuff, but I thought it'd be nice for us to share a quiet meal. Been a while since we sat down like this." As they began to eat, the atmosphere quickly settled into a warm, peaceful rhythm. The child giggled as she picked at a piece of soft pork, and Kiet chuckled, offering her more. Tu Nha watched the two of them, a mix of gratitude and tenderness blooming quietly in her chest. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic moments. Just the sounds of chopsticks clinking lightly against ceramic bowls, the occasional laughter of a child, and two adults stealing glances when the other wasn't looking. In those moments, nothing else mattered, not the rain, not the difficult past, not even the lingering complications that life still held. Tu Nha took a small bite, then looked across the table. You didn't have to go to all this trouble, you know. Kiet smiled. I know. But I wanted to. It means something to me, spending time with you two like this, even if it's just over a simple meal. She looked down for a moment, letting his words settle before giving him a nod that said more than words could. Well, thank you, really. It's been a while since someone cooked for me like this. They continued eating, pausing now and then for light conversation about the rain, about the workshop, about how Tuna's garden was doing. Everything felt easy and grounded. Nothing was forced, and yet everything carried a quiet intimacy. By the time they finished, the table was almost clean, the dishes nearly empty, and the sky outside had begun to darken into evening. Kiet stood up and began to clear the table without being asked. Tu Nha watched him from her seat, holding her daughter on her lap, a soft smile on her face. In a world that often demanded too much and gave too little this moment, this simple, heartfelt dinner felt like a rare gift. Kiet hadn't shown up with flowers or fancy words. Instead, he brought groceries, cooked a warm meal, and offered his presence without expectation. And in return, he received something just as meaningful, a place at the table, a spot in Tu Nha's quiet, carefully built world. Maybe it wasn't love in the traditional sense, at least not yet, but it was something real. Something built on kindness, trust, and time. After finishing their meal, Kiet and Tu Nha remained at the table, savoring the last moments of their quiet afternoon together. Tu Nha brought over a plate of freshly picked dragon fruit, the same ones she had harvested earlier that morning. Their bright pink skin and speckled white flesh were sweet and refreshing, a perfect ending to the simple yet heartfelt meal they had just shared. They sat side by side, slowly enjoying the fruit trading stories and laughter. For a while, everything felt light and peaceful. The rain had stopped, and a gentle breeze drifted through the open window. It was one of those rare, tender moments where life seemed to pause, allowing them to simply be with no worries, no interruptions. But that peace didn't last long. From the distance, a figure emerged. At first, it was hard to make out through the fading light, but as he drew closer, Tu Nha's expression shifted. It was Nam, her ex-husband. His face was tense, his steps heavy and fast. Without warning, he charged toward the porch. Nam, what are you? Tu Nha started, but her voice was cut short. Before either of them could react, Nam shoved Kiet hard in the shoulder, causing him to stumble back. The calm atmosphere shattered in an instant. Kiet caught his balance and raised his hands, trying to de-escalate, but the tension in the air was thick, and Tu Nha stood frozen, clutching the edge of the table as her daughter peeked out from behind the door. What happened next? Well, you'll have to wait for the next episode to find out, because things are just starting to get complicated.
Sau khi ăn xong, Kiet và Tử Nha vẫn ngồi ở bàn, tận hưởng những khoảnh khắc cuối cùng của buổi chiều yên tĩnh bên nhau. Tử Nha mang đến một đĩa thanh long mới hái, chính là loại mà cô đã hái vào sáng sớm. Lớp vỏ hồng tươi và thịt trắng lốm đốm của chúng ngọt ngào và tươi mát. Một kết thúc hoàn hảo cho bữa ăn giản dị nhưng chân thành, và họ vừa chia sẻ. Họ cùng nhau từ từ thưởng thức trái cây, kể chuyện cười đùa trong lúc một thứ đều nhẹ nhàng và yên bình. Mưa đã tạnh và một làn gió nhẹ thổi qua cửa sổ. Đó là một trong những khoảnh khắc hiếm hoi, dịu dàng mà cuộc sống dường như dừng lại, cho phép họ chỉ đơn giản là như vậy. Không lo lắng, không bị gián đoạn, nhưng sự bình yên đó không kéo dài lâu. Từ xa một người xuất hiện, lúc đầu thật khó để nhận ra qua ánh sáng đang mở dần, nhưng khi anh ta đến gần hơn, biểu cảm của Tử Nha thay đổi. Đó là Nam, chồng cũ của cô. Khuôn mặt anh căng thẳng, bước chân nặng nề và nhanh nhẹn, không báo trước. Anh lao về phía hiên nhà. Nam mày, Tử Nha bắt đầu, nhưng giọng của cô bị cắt ngang. Trước khi cả hai kịp phản ứng, Nam bị đẩy mạnh vai Kiệt, khiến anh loạng choạng lùi lại. Bầu không khí yên tĩnh tan vỡ trong chớp mắt. Kiệt lấy lại thăng bằng và giơ tay lên, cố gắng hạ nhiệt, nhưng bầu không khí căng thẳng quá mức. Kiệt và Tử Nha đứng nhìn nhắm mắt. Khi cô gái nhìn sau cánh cửa, chuyện gì xảy ra tiếp theo? Bạn sẽ phải đợi tiếp theo để biết, bởi vì mọi thứ mới bắt đầu trở nên phức tạp.